Hello, and welcome to Music People, a show where we get to meet inspiring people in music who've crafted their own lives and figured out how to make a career at it, and who are living well.
We're attempting it.
I'm your host, Jonathan Milton, and this is our very first episode, and I'm really excited to have Scott Faris here with us today. Scott is a producer, he's a musician, he's an engineer, he's a killer mixer, he's a graphic artist, he does a lot of stuff. The dude is amazing. He's just full of positive energy, always inspires me. He and his wife, Amy Faris, who is a composer, have created this studio here called Amusement Park Recording Studio, and it's a work of art in and of itself. I've recorded in so many studios, and this is my favorite place to record because I feel like so inspired here, and your energy totally gives me so much great energy. Welcome, Scott.
Oh my gosh, thank you. I don't know how I'm going to live up to that energy introduction because most of it's smoke and mirrors, but really it's just that I'm ADD and I'd like to do a lot of different things.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you know, the reason I wanted to talk to you for my very first guest is that you exude this positivity that really is infectious. And where does that come from, man? Like, how do you keep that going?
Wow, I don't know that I've ever really been asked that question. You know, I think some of it is, there's a couple things. One, that there's a piece of me that's really grateful that I get to do what I love. And so while anything you do can become a job, I mean, there are days that I'm recording and I really would rather be home, you know, playing with my grand dog. My daughter just bought a dog and he's awesome and I love, that kind of thing or whatever. But man, it's not lost on me how incredibly fortunate I am to get to live a creative life literally every day. All I do is make music and art. And there was a huge struggle. And I'd love to say that inside I'm always sunny and happy and all of that. I'm not. But when I'm getting to work on something like this, man, I roofed a barn one summer. I promise you, my worst day doing what I do now is better than my best day roofing.
Totally.
So I think that has a lot to do with it. I'm a person of faith as well, and I think that has a lot to do with it. But there's some gratefulness in the middle of it that I get to do something that I love.
Yeah.
Which is so rare.
Right on.
Yeah.
Well, how did you get started with music?
Oh, wow. Well, the interesting thing is, really, I was a visual artist first. My earliest recollection is a pencil in my hand. I've literally drawn since I was, in diapers practically, and I always dug in on that. So visual art was always a thing for me. So my interest in music really came about because of visual art. Growing up, I listened to what my parents listened to, just like all of us. It was John Denver and, the Carpenters and, stuff like that. And I was hearing music on the radio. I was hearing, the Eagles and, stuff from the 70s and stuff, because that's kind of when I was a kid. And one day I was watching TV and an ad for a record store comes on. And, they're trying to hype up the new albums. So the album would spin and hit the screen, right? And so this album cover spins and hits the screen. And it was the coolest album cover I've ever seen. And literally I saw it and I had to have it. It was Kiss Rock and Roll Over.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember the pizza pie with all their faces in it and all of that stuff?
How could you forget? Yeah.
I was like 8 years old. It was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. And literally, I made my parents take me to the record store, and I used my chore money or whatever it was, or whatever I got, $3 for my birthday or whatever. And I bought that record. And I literally went home and I put it on the turntable and I listened over and over and over again. And when I stopped, I walked into my parents' room and told them that I knew what I wanted to be when I grew up. Or when I grew up, and they said, well, what's that? And I said, a rock star. And they said, that's nice, patted me on the head and told me to go play,
Right.
So I bugged them for 3 years to get me a guitar, and they finally got me a guitar and lessons, and I think my parents are amazing people, incredibly supportive, but I think in their view, it was just part of being a well-rounded human being, that you should take music lessons, because every child does that, piano or something, right? I don't think they understood the monster that they were going to create, that this thing was going to literally eat my life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But at the same time that I was turned on to music because of that, it also furthered the visual art, because that's literally, I saw that album cover and I wanted to make those. And I actually get to do that. I make a lot of album covers now. So I both produce records and do my own music, and with my wife, who's also a composer, and then also the visual side of it as well.
Well, it's an apparent thing in your studio too. It's such a beautiful space. Even the ways that the color scheme that you guys have, these amazing. He's got light fixtures in here that he's built out of copper tubing with these ginormous Edison bulbs, and they're just works of art, and I want them all over my house.
Well, thank you. Basically, I'm a cheapskate, and I'm also, if you make art,
yeah,
you sometimes live on a lower economic scale.
Yeah, but you're making beautiful things out of it, and that's what's great. Yeah, you're crafting your own life essentially.
Well, that means the world to me. Thank you for saying that. It's to me, I grew up as a young man playing guitar in studios, and it was all kind of, everybody's trying to be high tech, and everything was white and clean, and they all felt like a hospital.
Right.
I mean, it felt like, I'm not here to play guitar, I'm here to get
Sterile.
an enema.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This has nothing to do with creativity.
Yeah.
So when I decided to build a studio, I wanted it to be a haven. I wanted it to be this, like, for lack of a better word, a womb-like thing for musicians, where they could forget the fact that they hit a dog on the way to work, or their significant other just broke up with them,
right,
or they just found out that their mom has cancer, or something. I mean, these are our lives, and while those things help us make art, gosh, man, sometimes we need to escape from the world for that.
Totally. So. Well, when I first recorded with you 2 years ago, it was exactly 2 years ago, actually. And I came in here and I got so much energy, not just from you, but from this space.
Oh, thank you.
And man, we did a whole bunch of stuff that night. And I think it was probably, it was one of the most productive sessions for me. Oh. And I think part of it was just being in this warm space, So for you, it started visually with the Kiss album, which I think is really interesting, and it's reflected in everything that you're doing. And then you started playing guitar.
Yep.
And you grew up in Colorado, was it?
Well, my dad was Air Force. Yeah. You can tell by my hair. This might be a military brat thing from my era, okay? And my dad actually was a bomber pilot. He flew B-52s in the height of the Cold War, so we were all over the world. I lived in California and Texas, and my dad went for training in Alabama, and we lived on an island. We lived on Guam for a little while when I was a boy, but Colorado Springs was always my hometown. That's where my grandparents lived. So while we didn't have a home, because at that time the military moved you literally every 2 years, so we didn't have that base, every summer we would go back and visit Grandma and Grandpa in Colorado Springs. So that became the anchor. And I was born in Denver, and we still have a place up in Colorado Springs. So I spend a lot of time up in the mountains and up there.
And how did you end up here? We're in Lubbock, Texas, by the way.
Yeah, Lubbock, which is absolutely one of the most creative cities in the country, shockingly.
Yeah.
We live in the middle of a desert.
What is it about this place, man?
I think it's the isolation.
Yeah.
I really do. I think the austerity of a desert, and I do think there's a little bit of that Western thing still out here that make your own way, and if you don't, you're gonna die. Thing.
Totally.
So yeah, I think that's there. I think there's something in the water. And besides, everybody for years, it's not true, but everybody for years said there's nothing else to do.
Right.
I mean, you're either going to get drunk or you're going to play, or you're going to do both of those things. That was, kind of the culture, I think, Yeah. And so I think that's part of it. But my dad got stationed down here.
Okay.
When there used to be an Air Force base here in town.
Right. The Reese Air Force Base. Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, I kind of, I definitely cut my teeth here. And I think for me, a lot of it was this vast openness of this place. I mean, we're on the Great Plains. it's wide open, and it makes you feel like there really aren't any limits to what you can do, you know.
No, I would agree with you. You know, the tagline for Lubbock, Texas is they say we have more sky.
Yeah.
Well, that's because, like, if your dog runs away, you can literally see him running for 3 days. I mean, it's like there's nothing to get in the way, you know.
That's right.
But there really is something about it. And I swore, you know, I had moved from Colorado Springs. My dad was stationed at the Air Force Academy, and we moved down here. And man, I swore I would never stay here.
Yeah.
But I met a girl in college, and we ended up getting married.
Yeah.
That was quite a few years ago now. We've got to make a lot of music and art together, and I have a pretty good artistic life here, which is kind of the opposite of what you would assume for kind of a smaller city that's geographically isolated, like we are.
Well, what did you do after college? What was your kind of work path through your career, and how did you end up in a place where you are doing your own thing?
Yeah. Well, I got a degree. My poor parents, my dad, when I graduated from high school, my dad said, "What do you want to do with your life?" You know, typical, you know, father. And I said, "I want to tour in a band." And my dad, you know, luckily said, "I don't care what you do, just as long as what you do makes you feel like I feel when I fly a jet."
Which is it right there.
I'm once again, it's not lost on me how fortunate I am, because not everybody has somebody who will say that.
Yeah.
You know, but my parents did say, "Please have a fallback plan." So I said, "I got it all figured out. I'm going to go to art school."
Did they like that?
Well, you know, I think it was better than music. You know what I mean? I think they were maybe less afraid.
Right.
Maybe a little less afraid of that. You know what I mean? So I went to Tech, and I studied visual art at the whole time, playing in bands, starting to record, do stuff like that. Yeah. And my wife and I, when I graduated from college, we got married right after I graduated, and we started kind of an odd thing. We actually we had a musical group, a band. It was a rock band that actually toured in the public schools, and we actually went around the state and did drug prevention programs, which was really kind of an odd thing.
Yeah.
But it was an incredible thing. We had 1-800 hotlines to help kids that were struggling with addiction, and it really wasn't a thing about being judgmental. It was really a thing about, you know, helping folks manage that tumultuous time period. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so it was a really great thing to be a part of. And Amy and I did that for about the first 7 years. We released one record under that, and then it came to an end. You know, all good things come to an end, and we got together with the drummer, and it was just one of those things. We were kind of the three primaries of that band, and we decided, you know, it's time to end this. So Amy and I knew at that point that, you know, our music had been really focused more on a message at that point. It was trying to reach people, you know, reach youth and stuff like that. And at that point, we really wanted to go into music for music's sake, art, and make art. And we knew we needed to take some time away from that, because what we were standing for was very important at that time. And so if we had been doing that and showed up in the bar literally the next night, there's a little bit of an issue there. And probably for us spiritually at that time too. So we stayed out for about 2 or 3 years, and I started doing graphic design, and we just had our first daughter, and we were still playing with some folks. You know, we'd sign on with a guy to go do 2 weeks, you know, down at Padre or something like that, you know, and go play for other folks. But the whole time we were really wanting to do original music. That's all we've ever cared about. Yeah. And so we started writing, and this is probably around 2000 or so, that we decided it was time to do it. And we put a band together called 100 Love Sonnets. And one of the best bands, arguably the best band I've ever been in. And we started doing clubs. We were playing all over the place, and it kind of blew up. And, you know, we were doing the motorhome thing and traveling every week. And
all in.
Yeah, all in, yeah. Around the same time, I also, I was working for a multimedia company doing graphic design and web design and stuff like that, and video. And then South Plains College asked me to teach for them. and I moved over there. And I guess I should. One other thing I would be remiss if I didn't mention is that the entire time I was doing all of this, all the way from college until I left SPC, I was also teaching at a really famed guitar studio here in Lubbock. It's Brandon Guitar Studio.
Oh, yes.
David Brandon was my mentor. He's a dear friend of mine. And I will say there was no one that had more of an impact on me in that regard. And to literally teach with a man who was touring the world with Christopher Parkening. They were the United States premier classical guitarists at the time. And, to not just be able to learn from him as a student, but to be able to learn from him in more of a peer relationship, that he accepted me as that, which I did not deserve.
It's a confidence booster, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, it worked. Yeah, it was amazing that he did that for me, because without David, I wouldn't be anywhere.
Right. He had such a huge impact, and you may not remember it, but that's where I first met you.
Oh, was it?
When I was just a punk kid myself, wanting to play guitar, Wow. And the first thing I did was I called up David Brandon, and I took lessons with him for about 2 months, but he taught me so much stuff in that time that I just went off on my own and just figured stuff out after that. But one of the times that he was out of town, you were there.
Did I teach you a makeup lesson?
Yeah.
Dude,
you sure did, man.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
And I was like, who is this cool guy? He's playing a 70s PRS guitar. And man, you were just full of energy. It was so great, man.
Oh, that's dope, man. Yeah. That's hilarious. I did not know that.
Yeah.
So
that was when I was 15. So it was a while back. I'm not going to say how old I am now.
Well, it was only probably 5 years ago.
4 or 5 years ago, yeah.
So I'd be remiss if I didn't mention him, because and he, in the ups and downs of touring and all of that, being able to stably teach guitar.
Yeah.
And I taught for David for 11 years, so I was there for a long time.
And you kept the graphic design going as well?
I kept the graphic design going,
Web design?
Web design. I started designing websites in 96, learned about the web in 95,
Yeah.
But then, like I said, around 2000, we put 100 Love Songs together, and I also, a little bit, maybe a couple years before that, I was asked to teach at SPC, which was obviously a huge deal. It's a phenomenal school, South Plains College. It's in Levelland, Texas. Literally the best kept secret for a music school in the country.
100%.
An amazing place. And I got to work with literally the cream of the crop, individuals and some mentors out there, to be able to teach with those folks. And I literally have students in bands all across the country because of that. Literally, they've played around the world. I had a student call me from the Country Music Awards a couple years back, and he was backstage about to go on.
Wow.
And that's cool. That was a neat thing. So I did that. I taught there for 9 years, all the while building bands and stuff like that. And then Amy and I decided it was time to not teach anymore. I'd done it for an awful long time.
Yeah.
And so I opened the studio, and that was 11 years ago now. And in that time, I've got to work with just some amazing artists and put out some records I'm proud of. We've had some, I guess what you would call legitimate chart success with some of this stuff. Not that matters, but it does help bring more clients and helps introduce people to you, to your work. And then Amy and I that whole time have really started. We've done a lot of film score, and we were even commissioned to do a ballet with Ballet Lubbock and perform that a couple years ago. And there were probably 50 people involved in the production, and it was huge,
Yeah.
So we've gotten to do some cool stuff. So there's the really long answer to your last question.
Well, as someone who, one of the focuses of this podcast is how musicians can make it on their own, and how they can create their own business, how they can craft their own lives and be successful in that. And I know, as a person who's doing that myself, that there's a lot of fear involved in really diving in and going for it 100%. And I know that you must have faced some of that when you decided to open this studio. Yeah. And what was the scariest thing about that, and how did you overcome it?
Well, and I'd like to say that fear was involved in every one of those endeavors.
Yeah.
Just about, That's probably why I do so much, Jonathan, is because of the fear of not eating or not being able to put shoes on my child's feet. Will motivate you, and you have to kind of diversify to survive the artistic life, especially in the economic times that we find ourselves in. Art, there are more opportunities now, but art and music is not necessarily as fiscally valued sometimes. So it's really hard. There were a lot of dark nights of the soul when I opened the studio. I literally opened it in 2009, 1 month before the economy tanked. And you literally watch the stock market crash. The government's like bailing out AEG, and you're just shaking your head. And I'm sitting there going, did I just make the worst decision of my life? I mean, I left a tenured position at a college.
Jeez,
and I left health insurance. All of that. And I had really examined our market, and I really felt like nobody was doing what I do. Nobody was providing the service in the unique way that I was doing. It's not that people were doing a bad job, because they weren't. They were doing a great job, but I felt like I brought something to our community and to record production in our community that was unique because of all those things in that sordid, long history.
Yeah, what are the unique things that you're bringing to the table?
First, passion.
Yeah.
I love this. I would rather be in a recording studio making a track than near anything in the world. And
that's why we get along so well.
Yeah. Well, this whole thing, it's a big toy to me. I mean, it's just like I'm a kid playing with Legos.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, it's just drums and bass and guitars and loops and weird noisemakers now, you know. And also, I found, you know, for instance, when I taught, that I don't know why, but for some reason my students were inspired by me. And to be honest with you, it's still sometimes to this day a mystery to me why that is. But there just seemed to be some thing that happened when I worked with people and we're making art that we were able to work with each other and elevate the thing that we're working on, the piece of music or the piece of art, and make it better than either one of us probably could have done by ourselves. You know what I mean? I really believe in that kind of amalgamation of a team thing.
You're elevating each other's energy.
Yeah, iron sharpens iron.
Yeah.
And it's the only way that happens. You know, that doesn't happen in a vacuum. And the other thing that I think I bring to the table is I'm brutally honest in love. If it sucks, I'm just going to say it. I'm going to go, hey, that part wasn't any good. We need to retract that. I'm not going to pull punches. And there's some people that may not want to work with me because they don't want to be told the truth, and I'm totally okay. I don't want to work with them either.
Totally.
I want to make great art. I don't want to half-a anything. I'm dead serious about this. When Amy and I got married, we really decided we wanted to create what's called an artful life. We wanted to create a life that was permeated by, surrounded by, and defined by music, art, film, literature, whatever it is. And if we're going to pursue that, we want to pursue it with excellence. And so I think that striving is also another thing I bring to the table.
I'd like to add to it. Your mixing skills are off the charts, man.
Oh. Thanks.
Off the charts.
Well, that's really kind of you to say, because literally every time I sit down at the board, I'm still scared half to death.
Yeah, that's why you're so good.
Well, that's kind of you. I'm not sure I view it that way, but I am always trying, at least.
Yeah.
But I think it's just like any human endeavor. I did notice, you know, when I was teaching at SPC, I was making 2 or 3 records a year because that's all I had time for. I could make a couple during the summer and maybe one the rest of the year, but I was so busy with teaching that I couldn't. That as soon as I quit, and I dug in, and I sat in front of that console 80, 90 hours a week, I mean, especially those early years, I was burning the oil. Something changed. My ears changed, my perception changed, my sense of pitch, my sense of timing. even my sense of how to interact with the artist, and really began to deepen, I guess. I know that's a terrible way to describe it, I think, but I think that ability to read the singer who's nervous.
Yeah. And you know how to respond to them.
Yeah. Yeah, like little microscopic details. Like if a singer's nervous, there's a super easy trick. I know this sounds so silly, but if I listen through headphones, if they're in hearing headphones and I put headphones on, they feel safer. I don't know why, but it happens every time.
Wow.
Every time I put the headphones on, they relax. Also helps turn out the lights, burn candles, you know the drill.
Burn some incense.
Absolutely. It's 24/7. This is a little hippie joint. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah. Well, I think about the concept of musicianship a lot. Yeah. And I know that you do too. And I'm curious for myself and for the listeners, how you define musicianship. What does it mean to you?
Oh, that is such a great question. I think there's two tracks that I would address that with. One, there's the concept of musicianship that is skill-based. That is about being in time, being in tune, playing notes that are appropriate to the chord progression, playing the changes, and all of that. And I think there are some musicians who are really, really exceptional at that. Studio musicians specifically sometimes are just earth-shatteringly amazing at that, being able to interpret that and hear harmonies and all of that stuff. And so I think one side of that coin is the skill level and the experience of the player and the ability to deliver on whatever instrument they're playing. But for me, more importantly, is the uniqueness of that person's soul, their heart being able to come out through their instrument.
Yeah.
There have been hundreds of musicians who I've worked with who would be considered on the lesser end of the skill scale, okay? But they have something so unique, something that is so intimately them, that it turns me on every time. That's what I gravitate to. All of the music that's my favorite music isn't the hyper-technical, really gymnastic, amazing. And those players are incredible, but that's not the stuff that draws me in. Sometimes it's a guy that's he's not very good, but oh my gosh, it's earth-shattering, And I think also the song plays a big role in that too. If the song's not any good, you can play great around the song, but it's not going to reach people. Yeah, you're rolling it in glitter. You know what you still get on your hands.
Yeah. Well, for me, it's about playing from the gut,
Agreed.
And honestly, when I'm listening to music, the stuff that I'm really drawn to is the stuff that makes me feel something.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
I mean, there's amazing technical players, and I'm just like, whoa, that's crazy, but when I feel something, then I know that person that's playing it is also I'm feeling their energy. And as a musician, I feel like we're always trying to tap into that, playing from the gut and getting out of your head, because your head doesn't know anything about making music. It's all down here. I mean, you learn with your head.
Yeah.
But it's like the more that you can forget about yourself and just listen to everything around you and interact with the audience and just play from down here, the better that your message is going to come across.
Well, when we transcend, because there are moments as a musician that you somehow enter some other state where, it's deeper than you're just playing that night.
Yeah.
That's always how it's happening. Your head is out of the picture.
Right.
When you're, to me, when you're learning, you're thinking about it. When you know it, it happens. And a lot of times there are accidents in those moments that happen that make it even more magical.
Even better.
And you're right. It's that same thing. If it's not coming from the person's heart, the uniqueness of them, because that's part of it. It's when you're playing, which I've heard countless times in your playing, having recorded you and you know what I mean? And we have common friends and all of that stuff. you play that way. And that's what makes your stuff great. That it's not math.
No.
You're not sitting there counting numbers in your head, clicking through the puzzle.
Right.
There's when you can put that stuff away and get that direct line into that emotion.
Yeah.
I think that's where real stuff goes down.
I was thinking about Joe Cocker this morning.
Yeah, who passed away recently.
He did, yeah. And because I was thinking about the concept of using your whole body to play, which for me, when I'm not quite in the gut, I'm thinking about what I'm doing too much, I start moving my body more. And that gets me into the it gets me into the feeling.
Yeah.
And I started thinking about Joe Cocker, man. And the way that dude would move, he'd sway around, do those crazy hand motions.
Eyes are closed.
Eyes are closed.
Yeah, it was
that
dope.
dude was singing from the depth of his soul, from the depth of all human experience of all time.
Yeah.
And because of that, and he didn't care if he was sounding perfect or not.
Yeah.
He was playing from the heart, man, and he would just level an audience,
Yes.
So I think that's where it's at.
Yeah, and I'd always rather hear somebody go for that and fail than be safe and
perfect.
Yeah,
in
tamped
quotes.
down. Yeah, I don't care about perfection. It's pretty overrated in my book.
Super overrated.
Well, it's probably because I could never attain it because I was never that good.
Right? You and me both, man.
It's just what it is.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, but then you learn how to play off your weaknesses, really, you know?
Yeah.
And some of the coolest stuff I've ever come up with is because I flubbed something. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah. Well, and I know for me, as a player, when I was growing up, everybody's doing these fast arpeggios and all this stuff, and I just couldn't pick that fast.
80s.
Yeah, so I had to learn how to make one note sound okay.
Yeah.
And hopefully choose the right note. There were plenty of wrong ones, still are, but it was more about translating that emotion. I didn't care about the gymnastics of it.
Yeah.
And I still don't. I think that can be a tool. I think that can heighten emotion in a moment. But gosh, if you do that all night long, man, I'm tired.
Yeah.
I'm done.
It wears thin.
Yeah.
Who is someone that you would think of as, or I guess who are some of your biggest influences musically?
Probably the first honest guitar influence was probably John Denver, because I was outside of the Mel Bay series that my teacher was taking me through, occasionally give me a song and I'd, play Grandma's Featherbed or, Rocky Mountain High or,
Great stuff to learn when you're starting out, man.
All open chords.
Yeah.
It's super cool. Yeah. Melodies are good. I can't sing for crap, but I could learn those songs. So that's probably number one. Kiss was an influence, which I look back now and go, probably could have chosen a better band, but I still love. There's such
so cool.
They did, and they breathed fire and spit blood. It was what's not to like for an 8-year-old boy. You know what I mean? Probably the first guitar hero I had was Rick Emmett from Triumph, which is a band that I started listening to really in the late 70s. Yeah. Really loved that guy because he would put classical influenced acoustic guitar pieces on every album. And so I'd go into David and go, help me learn, this piece. And so that was probably the bridge for me into other music forms on my instrument, as opposed to just playing rock and roll, you know. Eddie Van Halen probably early on, because I thought I wanted to be him. That later faded because I'm not and can't. So that answered that. I got into Eric Johnson for a long time when I did go through like a hyper technical phase, but his stuff was really more about his tone. Yeah. Because it was just gorgeous. Yeah. That was the first time that I really experienced the possibility of what the sound of an electric guitar could do. Yeah. And that opened me a lot. Okay. Then it went raw. It went into people like Lenny Kravitz, went into bands like Foo Fighters. Love the Foo Fighters. Nowadays, the stuff I'm really into is stuff like Alabama Shakes. God, it's just great stuff. Yeah. My record collection literally goes from Chet Atkins to Frank Zappa and everything in between. So I'm going to pull stuff from anywhere. But those are some of the big ones. Yeah. Now it's really more the gestalt of how the band sounds. I'm less guitar centric. Yeah. I used to be real guitar centric, and now I really think more globally.
Well, I remember when I first heard you perform, the things that I remember that are really super great about your playing is your tone.
Oh, thank you.
And your melodic sense.
Oh.
And the band that you and Amy had at that time, what was it after?
Do you remember when that was?
Was it Meltdown?
Oh, Meltdown Morning. Yeah. That's what 100 Love Sonnets kind of morphed into Meltdown Morning.
Okay, I thought it was something like that.
It was the same group of people. We, went through the stupid name change because people could never pronounce their name right. They'd go 101 Love Sonnets. We live in West Texas.
Texas.
Yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah.
Hindsight, I think the name change was a mistake. We should have stuck with it. It was great. But it was a really great band.
Well, you guys were incredible, man. I saw you play outdoors one time, and just one time.
Yeah.
And the hooks from those songs are stuck in my head to this day.
Oh,
They'll
wow.
just pop in my head sometimes.
Super kind of you to say.
Yeah.
Some of those might have been mine. I'd hate to take credit for all of that because my wife is a genius melody writer, man. She just is. And she gets the hook thing on a level like nobody's business, man. It's a really rare gift that she has. But we were also a good team. We've played for so many years together. We know how to weave.
Yeah.
The Rolling Stones always talked about that. You know what I mean? That there's this, if there's two guitars and keyboard in a band or whatever, you can't be playing the same thing, man. You gotta, and you also gotta know when to shut up.
Yes. Which is really hard for some people.
Me included sometimes.
And me.
The guitar player's disease.
That's it.
Fill all the space with guitar.
Stop noodling.
Yes, thank you.
Oh man. Well, I'm really interested in health for musicians, and I wanted to ask you about that because I feel like as musicians, a lot of times we're working in places that are maybe not the healthiest place. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And especially if you're gigging a lot, it's tough to get a good meal on time when you're moving around a lot.
Good night's sleep's real hard to come by.
The sleep. You end up eating some crappy food at the venue or something. Then there's alcohol, and you're kind of surrounded by all that, and then you're staying up late, and you might not sleep too well. And I think it's really hard for us as musicians to maintain our physical and mental health. I mean, there's a mental health epidemic amongst musicians, and I think this is a big reason behind it.
Yeah.
People get into music because they love it, but they're working in environments and in time frames that make it hard to stay healthy.
It's true.
What are some of the ways that you guys got around that when you were touring, and even now? How do you maintain a healthy lifestyle?
Well, that's pretty fascinating because back when I was touring and we were playing bars 5 nights a week. We were hammering hard. You know what I mean? And at that point, I didn't even drink. I don't really know what led to that necessarily, other than I'm not sure I know. You know what I mean? It was just something that felt important to me at that time. I have developed a taste for whiskey nowadays, and I actually like it quite a lot.
Yeah.
But I'm also able to moderate those things.
Yeah.
Okay. And a lot of my fellow musicians struggle with that.
Yeah.
Really, it is a tough thing, and I think part of it's because sometimes we need something to loosen us, to help us get past the fear. And I think as musicians, one of the things we struggle with a lot mentally is what they call fraud syndrome, is that, no, you're not good enough to be playing right now. You're not good enough to be on stage. You are not as good as XYZ player. You don't deserve to be here. And there's probably some nights that's true. There's nights that's like, yeah, I'm not doing very well, But really, that's BS, man. The person who deserves to be on that stage is the person who is on that stage. But there's this whole mental battle that we fight. And I think alcohol and drugs, the thing that happens is they help tamp that battle down so that people can play. The difficulty is I think over a longer arc, those things can take over. I've had a lot of friends, lose that to addiction. and everything else. If you're in music long enough, you're gonna know somebody,
Yeah.
you know. And my heart goes out to them because I think it's a really, really difficult thing, and I'm not judgmental about that at all, because I totally understand. I mean, there's times if I'm walking on stage, I need a little something to calm me down. You know what I mean?
It's hard, man.
It is. It's really difficult.
And then you get the adrenaline rush of being up there.
Yeah.
And then how are you going to sleep after, you know?
You're totally
So,
right.
You know, that kind of adds to it.
Yeah, and having, I am naturally an insomniac. I'm also naturally a worrier, which is really difficult on the artist. There's a lot of us that are, and so I at one point, and am still using it, went to my doctor and said I have to sleep. So he prescribed Ambien to me, and it literally revolutionized my life.
Yeah.
But it's highly addictive. So,
Yeah.
wow, where's that line? You know what I mean? Not sure I know where that line is right now. But
Right.
I do know, however, if I don't sleep, I don't do well. I don't produce well. I don't play well. I don't interact well. So to me, that's one of those ones that's really hard. And I think the mental health issue for musicians is the physical is for sure important and difficult, but I think the mental health is what leads to a lot of times the physical issues.
Yeah.
No one would know this, and because I am in my interactions with others and the way I approach stuff, a pretty up person, you would think. But I've struggled with depression my entire life, like clinical, and been on antidepressants and the whole 9 yards. I'm still on them right now. And so I think that's a really tough thing. I don't know that I have a really good answer. I did, we all suffer tragedies in our lives and tough time periods. And I'm kind of just coming out of one that has been really, really difficult. It's been over the last 3 years. And in that time, the one thing I have done is I actually started studying meditation. I'm not very good at it. I love all these people that, let's put on Instagram in our yoga pose and stuff. I mean, I'm so glad. I hope that's truth and is really working for you, because it can be so beneficial. I think most of it's BS and image. But I do believe that those things can be helpful to you. And meditation, probably during that time period, being mindful, the mindfulness concept, probably saved me. And there, I do have a little piece of a skill as a coping skill now, that like heart rate's going. I had to speak at the Texas Music Educators Association, and how that worked out, I don't know. But I spoke at that this last year, and going into it, the group ahead of us ran 15 minutes late. There was a snowball effect. Nobody was ready. It was a mess, on the front of that. And I literally went in the bathroom, sat down in a stall and closed it and meditated for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
They didn't know where I was. I didn't care at that point, because I needed to get this under control, or I was not going to do a good presentation.
Right.
So there is a skill, I think that has helped me, that I can do some breathing exercises and kind of
I'll tell you what, man.
bring that back down.
Yeah,
meditation
has changed my life too.
Yeah.
In the last 3 years, actually.
Yeah.
And I've been through a lot of the same thing, similar, having depression or performance anxiety. I've had health problems that I've gone through and overcome.
Yeah.
I've dealt with substance issues just from being from
Absolutely
playing and being out there.
Yeah, who hasn't?
Right. And in that cycle,
Yeah.
because of, I don't know, all the pressure and everything. But but one day I knew that I needed to do something. I was also having relationship problems, and I knew that I needed to do something, to work on myself.
Yeah.
And the meditation, it started there, actually. And it just made me aware that most of this crap that's running through my head is not even real, man. It's just like made up shit that sometimes I'm believing it, right? And I'm latching onto it, and then there's a story. And I'm not saying that never happens, even still, but like, at least now I'm aware of it when it's happening most of the time. And also I'm aware of it when I'm starting to have some kind of fear about something.
Yeah.
I'm like, you know what? Okay, I feel my heart racing, but does this thing actually matter that I'm scared about?
And is it even the truth?
Yeah, is it even true?
You know, there's a great speaker who did a TED Talk. Her name's Brene Brown, and she talks about, you know, she deals with intimacy issues and the concept of shame. And really what's we're dealing with when we walk on stage is we're going to feel ashamed if we do a bad job, you know? And so there's this huge amount of fear attached to that, you know? Yeah. And you know what? You're going to blow it sometimes. Yeah. It's just reality, you know? And she talked a lot about that. And it was real earth-shattering to me, just that concept. She talked about the stories that we tell ourselves. Yeah. Like if I have somebody that wants me to make a record for them, and I don't hear back from them for 2 weeks, the thing that goes on in the back of my head is, they found somebody else. They don't like me anymore. I must have done something wrong. I must have, you know what I mean? Those are those things that enter your head. And you know what? None of that was true. Yeah. They went on vacation. They're not thinking about me at all. You know, they'll get back to me. They get back to me 3 weeks later. You know what I mean? Right. That kind of thing. But we as humans, I think there's a self-preservation thing that we're always kind of looking out for the worst. Yeah. And you know, I don't think there's anything wrong with being prepared for things. I think that's really healthy. But when all you do is anticipate the worst continually, that's not reality. If the worst is going to happen, there's nothing that you're worrying about it can do to change it 99% of the time. Yeah. And a lot of times it's literally just a thought that goes through your brain, and those are going to just keep happening. But what I do invariably is I grab onto it, and then I sit and cycle on it, and I circle and I circle and go, oh my gosh, this person doesn't like me, or I did a bad job, or you know, whatever. And man, that's a vortex, dude. It's just like a vacuum cleaner sucking you down, you know?
It is, man. It's wasting your time. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'd love to be flippant about it and say that's easy to manage. Oh, just breathe. You know what I mean? Right. We both know that's bull.
Not easy.
Yeah, we both know that's BS.
I think the key is just being aware of it, you know?
Agreed.
I mean, it's not like you're going to always overcome it, because you're still going to get stuck in that vortex sometimes.
And you're human.
Yeah. But as long as you continue to just be aware of the fact that it's happening, that's really all you can do, you know?
It's huge. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and identifying it, you know what I mean? It's like just being able to go, am I telling myself a story right now? Or is that really true?
Yeah.
Do I know that person doesn't like me and want to work with me anymore or whatever? Yeah. No, that doesn't. Yeah. Did they say that? No,
just a thought.
It's just you, man. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, and it's really interesting, you know, when you have a conversation like this and you find out how universal that is. Yeah. Among all of us, and it's not just artists; it's everybody. Right. You know, and I think if we could all kind of get over that and realize that, you know, and I think, you know, a real healthy thing to do. Amy and I have dealt with that before. You know, when you're in a relationship, there's countless stories that you say about the other person that you think they're thinking. Yeah. And that's the farthest thing. They were thinking that they wanted ice cream. And you're like, you know, imminent breakup, you know, it's in your brain, you know. And so to kind of support each other and go, hey man, is something up? Is there some kind of story you're telling yourself about what just got said? Yeah. You know what I mean? And kind of
just talking it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Did your video stop, Nat? Can you start video on the phone, or did you? Okay, cool.
Dope.
Cool.
She's good, man. She's got it going on. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. So, what's it like being in a marriage that's a creative partnership like what you guys have?
Wow,
It sounds amazing.
Yeah, it absolutely is, and I know that sounds a little tentative, because it's also incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
Amy and I were very intentional about it early on, and I think one of the strengths that we have is that we are both capable in our lanes. Okay, her lane is nothing to do with audio. She is a musician's musician. Mm-hmm. She is brilliant. Literally, her brain, she sees the notes go by. When she hears a song on the radio or a classical piece, her brain is showing the rhythms. She sees it.
Wow.
She sees the notes. Yeah. Which is phenomenal. She's a true composer. She's classically trained. She's really, really brilliant. Me, on the other hand, no, I'm sort of dumb. I just plug into a loud guitar, let it make a lot of squeals and noises, and, this is sort of my thing, And she can't do that.
Yeah.
And I can't do what she does.
Yeah.
So we learned that early on. And one of the things we always tried to do, and I don't know if we were successful about this or not, but we tried to check the relationship at the rehearsal hall door and not let that get in the way of making great art together. Mm-hmm. And to be able to truthfully critique each other, which is very difficult inside of a marriage, mm-hmm. because that can get ugly really fast. So you probably have to be more intentional about what you say and don't say, which probably is useful in any given significant other relationship. You know what I mean? Yeah. But also not easy. Being musicians, Amy and I have struggled because of the fiscal side of things. Yeah. The money is one of the things that any couple fights over the most. And when you are a musician and you do this full time, unless there's some kind of act of God and you sell 1 million units, which doesn't happen too often anymore, you generally don't live on the upper end of the economic scale. And that can be really difficult when you're raising a child and trying to put her through college, mm-hmm. And pay for a wedding, those types of things. So Amy and I have the most amazing creative relationship and a wonderful marriage, but I won't say that we haven't had our struggles, because we have. We've gone to counseling together to work on a lot of that stuff, because it is difficult. And I think the longer arc of that is difficult when you reach the time when you're trying to help your kid enter the rest of the world, you know what I mean? And all of that. That becomes really difficult. But the ability to create music together and on a what I would hope is a pretty real level, we've been doing it together now literally for 30 years. And we've got a sixth sense about it. We don't get our panties in a wad when she goes, "Hey man, I don't like your melody here. Try this. There's a different rhythm that you could play right there, or don't play at all." Which I do. I am a guitar player, so there is that disease. But we've always kind of been each other's biggest advocates too. Yeah. Like right now, one of the things I'm really thrilled about is she has a new trio. Yeah. That's 3 of the finest women musicians you've ever heard. The trio is called Scabaret, and they're phenomenal. And so whenever she has something like that, I'm her biggest cheerleader. Whenever I have something, she's my biggest cheerleader. So there's pluses and minuses, I think, to anything. It's not for the faint of heart. But if you can make it work, it might be one of the most rewarding things you can imagine.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that applies to any sort of creating your own business type of, it applies across all realms.
It does.
And it's very difficult and scary, but if you're dedicated to it and you are willing to put in the work, it can be the best thing on earth, because you're actually living your life with full intention and creatively. You're crafting your own reality.
You're right.
And that's why you guys inspire me so much.
That's kind of you to say.
And you've been at it for 30 years working towards this, man. It's incredible.
I have a viewpoint about music. I think it's like boxing. You have to be the last guy in the ring that can still take a punch.
Yes.
And so I'm walking in there with a bad back, and I'm half blind.
You're that dude that keeps standing back up.
You stand back up and you go, "I'm gonna make another piece of art."
Yeah.
And I do think there is something to that. And I'll be honest with you. I'm fortunate. I make a living. I'm certainly not wealthy, but I'm able to, I'm able to pay for a house and a car and a.
You guys just bought this place, didn't you?
I just bought the building. Yeah. It took me 7 years to get to the point where I could do this, but I just bought the building, which really means I bought a big chunk of debt. That's how those things work. So you have to be really intentional about those things, but it's really difficult, but it's really rewarding.
Yeah. Well, I know you're very humble about it, but you have, I would consider you a very successful person because you're doing what you love. for your living. And I know that you taught a class on this at
did.
South Plains College.
Yeah.
So what if you were just starting out today, just for people that are listening, what are some things that they could do? I know that a lot of times as musicians, we focus on getting gigs and making records and this and that, but I think you got to do other stuff too nowadays.
Yeah, you absolutely do. You absolutely do. I think there's a few key things that you can look at. A real meaningful moment in my path was the first day I went to art school, and my art professor stood up before the class and introduced himself and all of that stuff, and he said, "How many of you want to be artists?" All the hands went up. "How many of you would like to be a millionaire?" And a few hands tentatively went up, and I was like, "This is a trick question. Don't raise your hand." And he said, "That's great. Those two are not necessarily compatible. If you'd like to make $1 million, leave. Go study finance, study banking. That's how you make $1 million. But if you want to make art, you're in the right place." And I went, I better take that to heart. Because chances are you're not going to make $1 million doing this. You're just not. For years and years, you're going to eat by making $16,000, $18,000 a year. If that, you're going to live in the underground economy for a long time. Living off of $50 a night in a beer tab.
People are going to try to pay you in beer.
Yeah. And some nights, it's not a bad thing. But yeah. So you're gonna, you do have to recognize that. I used to joke that I took the vow of poverty. It's not really that. You can make a living doing this.
Yeah.
You can make a decent living. But if you're the guy that has to have a new sports car every year, and you're the guy that needs the $1 million house on the lake, this might not be the career for you.
Probably not it.
Because you're going to be, trying to scrape together $1,500 to buy that guitar you just saw. You know what I mean? And paying for that $50 a night. I think diversification is really an important key to it. Gigs are going to dry up. Bands are going to break up. Songs may hit, and then the next song may not. And, I got a royalty statement the other day from BMI. I have some pieces out there. I got a royalty check for $6. It was...
It's better than a Spotify check.
You were so right, because that would be 6 cents. But I'd rather have $6 from that than nothing. You know what I mean? And I've had some decent checks too. I've had decent royalty checks. I've had some years you go, oh well. And some years you go, hey, cool. That was cool. That was okay. There's that cycle, and it's all ups and downs. But diversifying, finding another skill that you have, teaching, is a great skill for musicians. As a matter of fact, there's a famous banjo player named Al Mundy. He's a friend of mine. He used to teach with Al at NCC. Yeah, he's phenomenal. He's like one of the guys that invented techniques for banjo. And he and I were talking, and he said, well, that people are more likely to pay you to show them how to do what you do than to pay to watch you or listen to you do what you do.
That is true.
And there's a lot of truth to that, because people will line up for guitar lessons, and they'll show up at the bar once every 20 gigs or whatever. So I think stuff like that. That's also why I love doing album covers, because there's a supplement there for me. Web design, I do that kind of stuff. I've done print stuff for corporations. I do, you know what I mean? Basically, I'll do whatever it takes to put food on the table for my family, but keep striving towards it. I've always made every career decision in my life based on what takes me closer to the dream or farther from the dream. I had somebody offer me an enormous sum of money to run a company in Dallas at one point. And I could have done it, and it would have meant working 51 weeks a year and no longer doing music. I don't want 6 figures that bad. I just don't have any desire for that. So I turned it down. So I think that that's important. I also think I like to look at music and finances very realistically. If I was the musician out there who wasn't earning everything from that. I might be really, working for a multimedia company, which was still creative, but still not what I wanted to do, but I always look at music in a really sometimes fiscally cold fashion. Like, okay, I'm making $300 a month extra because I'm playing. I'm not paying for my car because I play guitar. That's how I equate that. That now makes it valid as an employment source. And if I can turn that into $600, I'm paying for my car and my insurance. And if I can turn that into $1,200, I'm paying for part of my rent, and I'm paying. And so I'm pretty cold about those things, if that makes sense. I think it's really important to look at that, because that makes that more viable, especially on the early side of your career when you don't have the contacts and the experience that you have later in life, to realize that, hey, what's wrong with, you played 6 shows this month and made $750 extra as a guitarist.
Yeah.
That's fantastic, and then to try to increase that and be cognizant of it. And I think as a final thing, I think you have to look at, are you willing to do this even if you don't make it? It's funny because you said you view me as a successful businessman. Back to the fraud syndrome. I have always considered myself a failure my entire life. I'm not sitting on a stage playing in front of 120,000 people like I thought I would be when I was 8 years old and put Kiss on for the first time. You know what I mean? I thought I'd be breathing fire by now. I've never breathed fire, Those goals change as you age, obviously. But are you going to continue and do this even if you don't make your living at it? If that's the case, welcome to the family. You're a musician.
Right.
And I think that's a really important thing to recognize. And to me, the people who are willing to do that are much more likely to find a way to make a living with it, because they're not going to stop just because there are fiscal limits or whatever, that they're going to stay true to the art form.
Well, a lot of times when we think about success, we think of it in terms of money, right?
That's what our society tells us.
Right.
Money and fame.
Yeah. And honestly, money is part of being successful, because you need money to get things, right? But success really is living life in the way that you want to live it.
You're right.
And that's why I consider you guys so successful, because you're making a living at it, but also you're just creating art and doing the thing that you love and making it your job. It's, it's very inspiring. And I want to kind of inspire other people to figure out a way to do that themselves. And I think a lot of musicians fall off because they don't pay attention to the finance part of it, to the money part, right? They're not accounting for what all they're spending, and they're blowing their money after the gig or whatever, right?
Sure.
And one of the biggest differences for me that really made a huge impact was tracking every single thing that I'm spending in this business, and tracking every single thing that's coming in too. So once I started doing that, I started making way better decisions and making more money as well.
Yeah, you absolutely do. And I think it's really important to recognize that, even, let's say, back when I had a day gig and I'm getting a paycheck from somebody else, they're pulling money out of my check. Well, if I'm smart about it and I go, well, outside of that, all my taxes are being pulled out of that. I get it. I got to pay taxes. I live in the greatest country on earth. We certainly have our problems, but I can't do what I do in Afghanistan. So I'm grateful to be in this country. So I believe in paying taxes. But if I'm going to I made $100 playing last night. Well, I'm going to claim that income. But then I can put that on Schedule C, and I can write off my musical purchases. And there are times that under that day gig, I spent more than I made. Write that crap off, because guess what? I got more back from the government. So because I had a loss on my Schedule C or what, you know what I mean? If you're intelligent about it and you pay attention to business in that regard, and I'm by no means a genius with money, that is for sure. I can barely add. But if if you are intentional about that, you're going to be better off. It's just a fact.
Way better decision making.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of discipline to start doing it, right? I mean, and as musicians, we're like, well, that's whatever, you know.
Absolutely.
But just start writing it down on a piece of paper or something, man.
Yeah.
And once you do, you start realizing things that you weren't really thinking about, you know?
Well, and years ago, a businessman that was in a totally different industry, he was non-creative at all, and it gave me a piece of advice that I thought was the dumbest thing I'd ever heard until I tried it. And he said, oh, you're a musician and stuff, and you have this other gig, right? And he said, have you started a bank account for your music yet? And I was like, no, it's all just going in the same pot. He said, that's a mistake. Separate your money. Separate it. Create an account for your music. And you know what? The second I did that, and I separated, here's my personal, and here's what's going on with my business started to grow. Because I was paying attention to it. Instead of it all going into the same pot, and it would just disappear.
Yeah.
And now I have to be intentional about, I need to pay myself something, you know, out of the business, or I need to pay my employees. I need to pay my, you know what I mean?
Right.
Whatever, you know, the bills for the building. I'm now aware of what that is. Right. And so I think there is that thing of being able to put it on point and pay attention to it. Is crucial.
That's a really simple thing that you could do.
Absolutely.
And another thing is you can think about paying yourself. You know, because once you start realizing how much is coming in, how much you're spending, then you start thinking about how much you're worth, and what is your hourly rate. You know,
right?
And you stop accepting, you know, stuff that just isn't worth it.
Yeah.
That was a huge shift for me. I said no. You know, I started at $50 an hour or something like that.
Yeah.
And that's where I started. And as soon as I started doing that, you know, because before that there was fear that, oh my God, well, what if I don't get gigs because people because
I turned something down?
Yeah,
totally.
And when I started turning things down, well, they started offering me more.
That's right.
And people start respecting you more when you do that, and so you get better gigs.
If you devalue your work, so will the rest of the world. It's not that you have to be. I certainly. I'm not a greedy person. I really don't care about money at all.
Yeah.
But if I don't earn it, I can't keep these doors open.
Right.
If I don't keep these doors open, there's certain people that aren't going to be able to create in the same way that they might be able to create here. And to me, that's important. Yeah. Not to mention that I want to create here. You know. So no, I agree with you. I think, you know, especially musicians on the front end have a tendency to devalue their work. And, you know, when you look at I heard one time, I read somewhere that Elvis's band in the 50s, before he hit, was being paid $100 a man a night.
In the 50s.
That's still the going rate. And it's 2019.
Right.
That's pathetic.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But because there's always somebody out there who will do it for beer, they're devaluing the scene in many regards. Right. You know? And I'll promise you most of the bars, not always, some of the bars really struggle. But when the bar's pulling down a $20,000 bar tab that night and they won't pay the band, a 4-piece band, $500 to cover sound man and the band, something's wrong.
Yeah.
You know?
And those musicians really need to look at what they're worth, you know?
I agree.
So what's next for you guys?
Oh, gosh. I actually have a songwriter festival that I'm working on right now. Yeah. That's going to happen in a couple months here. Amy is working with Yvonne Rocks from the ballet, and they're about to present a research paper about Click, which is the ballet that we just did.
You guys composed all the... recorded and composed all the music for that?
And actually performed it live with the dancers and everything. It was a pretty amazing performance. It was really incredible. I've never had my music interpreted by the human body before. And that was
fantastic.
So incredible to see that, you know, and real inspiring, you know. And we would do a piece or part of a piece and they would choreograph to it. We'd go see it, and then that would inform the rest of the piece. It was just an incredible experience. So they're doing that, and looks like, you know, Yvonne and Amy are hoping to, you know, that'll rear its ugly head up again. I'm still working on Metropolis, which is a Metropolis Electro, which is a new score that Amy and I wrote to Metropolis and perform with a 24-piece ensemble live to the film. And then Amy and I both have a lot of new music we've been working on. I've been writing up in Colorado and painting a little bit too.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So nothing huge that I can talk about yet.
Yeah.
You know?
Okay.
But lots of little irons in the fire.
Well, what about Scabaret? Where can we find them?
Scabaret, they've really only played a few gigs thus far. We just recorded a live album with them here in the studio, which should be coming out here. We're hoping to get it out by mid-July, so that should be really, really quick. And then they're going to be playing up in Colorado, up in the Longmont Boulder area for a little bit at the end of July, and then then in the fall they're going to hit it here pretty hard. They'll probably be playing over at the Blue Light. I've been talking to them, and so there's some great stuff, and it is phenomenal.
Yeah.
Her trio is just top notch.
Yeah. Well, I heard some clips. It's killer stuff, man.
And it's all original. It's all Amy's compositions.
Yeah.
They're phenomenal, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, we'll have to get Amy on the next episode.
She'd love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been great, Scott.
I've enjoyed it so
Appreciate
much.
you, brother.
Yeah, you too, my friend.
You're an inspiration.
Thanks for considering me. It's a real honor. I really appreciate it.
All right, man.
Okay.
Next time.
All right. Sounds good.
Cheers.
Awesome. Whoop. Thanks for filming that.
Of course.
Super cool.
That was great.
It was so unfortunate.
No.
The card.
You got the rest of it?
Yeah, I did, but the card.
What happens? It's all good.
I need to just get bigger SD cards.
Well, and some cameras actually just stop.